This highly anticipated. The other two, they came out bam, really quick, one after another. We had to wait only a couple years for this one. We heard rumblings. I'm like, it's gonna be based on Italian giallo. I'm like, oh fuck, badass. Like, this is gonna be badass. For people that don't know, basically, Robbie, I know you talk a lot about it on your show. We've talked about some of it. Basically, I wanted to do Deep Red in this horror fest before this, specifically so Lincoln Stew, so you guys had seen a real Italian giallo film, but you guys have seen Brian De Palma films. So that's pretty much what this is. This almost feels more like a De Palma film than an Argento film. I'll just stop there. Robbie, what do you think of that? Does it feel a little bit more, you know what I mean?
Well, so it is, yeah, it doesn't feel like a giallo. It doesn't feel like an Argento or a Fulci giallo from back in the day,
But
right?
it does, but it does.
Like.
Yeah,
It does, but it doesn't. If it's an Americanized version, this is Hollywood.
totally.
This is
It's
Hollywood.
very, very American, but very inspired by
all
Italian
three of
stuff.
these films are dealing with American cinema.
Right.
Right. Because even in Pearl, dude says, oh, there's this new stuff. It's called the French New Wave. It's going to change the fucking world and shit like that. Right. So this is like, first of all, the giallo really influenced the slasher film. Right. And then there's a French film,
Totally,
Diabolique, right, which influenced the American slasher film. There are Canadian films like Black Christmas that influenced the American slasher film. The American slasher film is an amalgamation of a bunch of different cinematic styles from other countries, including giallo, right?
Totally.
But this feels like the Americanized version of it. I love Maxxxine, right? And I do see that they're doing the giallo thing or the De Palma thing, if you want to call it that. But they're doing a lot. Yeah. So we're talking about cinema in the 70s. He's not just using techniques about 70s horror. He's using 70s movies techniques. You 80s. Know, like and another thing in X, that's what he's doing, right?
Okay.
Where he's like got the zoom, he's got the pan across the pond and shit like that. In Pearl, he's mimicking like the first 2 decades of cinema, right? Here, he's got a lot to do. Because part of the theme of these movies is where it starts, when it becomes part of where anybody can make a movie. Because think about that. Cinema starts in 1910s, right? With silent films and shit like that. Actually, it starts like in the early 1800s, but we don't need a 1897 X fucking movie. You know what I'm saying? Maybe we do. I don't fucking know. But like,
I'm down.
I would be down to see that too. And he actually makes a silent film.
He just releases it on YouTube. It's
like 60 minutes long. That would be fucking great, dude. But like, you know, when cinema started, it was for the elite, right? Whether you're making it or watching it, right? And it's a pleasure to watch it. Then all of a sudden in X, it's anybody can make a fucking movie. We got video cameras now. We got like 8mm now. Like we can do this shit on our own. And that's the moment where the populace took control of cinema. And then what was the response? The response is Maxxxine, the excessive nature of the 1980s. So in this movie, he's got the giallo influence, but dude, he's talking about canon films. He's talking about like 80s action movies. He's talking about 80s slasher horrors. Like a lot of people, that their biggest problem with Maxxxine, and my biggest problem when I first watched it, was the twist towards the end. Oh, it's her dad, the preacher, set up an X. But then when you rewatch these fucking films, you go, man, this shit's been set up from the fucking beginning. It feels like it's so intentional from the beginning, but we know how art is. Art inspires art, and the art you make inspires your next piece of art, right? So I love the third act of this film because that is an 80s fucking slasher movie, man. It is like a dude who gets revealed, who goes so fucking cheesy and ham. This is like Scream level shit. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
Like, somebody takes off the fucking mask, all of a sudden they're the goddamn Willem Dafoe's fucking Green Goblin. You know what I'm saying? It's like, who the fuck are you all of a sudden? I love that about this movie. It's talking about excess. It's talking about VHS. It's talking about how cinema started back in Pearl. Then in X, everybody's able to make movies. This videotape thing is going to change the fucking world. And it did, because now anybody can fucking make a movie. And in the 80s, because anybody could make a movie, we had the most excessive, flamboyant, and bombastic fucking decade of cinema history. We had shit like E.T., we had shit like fucking Life Force, we had shit like fucking Fright Night. The 80s are wild, and there's so much art there and so much sleaze there. And there's this great moment in the 1980s where sleaze and art overlap, and Maxxxine is talking about that, man. Boom. I fucking love this movie. By the way,
if I could drop my mic, I would.
Who cares about the best fucking kill in these fucking 3 films? The best gore scene in these 3 films is when she stomps her fucking hill on that motherfucker's ball sack. You know what happened to the last motherfucker who tried to kill me?
That's what's interesting. Like when you watch this movie, that's kind of like you're going to this movie. I'm thinking like, okay, Maxxxine, we kind of know where she's been. What's she gonna be like in the 80s? She's in Hollywood. Is she gonna be killing motherfuckers? And I think there's a movie called Miss 45 about a girl that gets raped twice in the first like 15 minutes of the movie, and then just goes around killing people afterwards. And she's walking around the streets of New York just taking motherfuckers out. That's what that scene reminded me of her stomping on the nuts. What's that stuff?
Is it a newer film, Miss 45?
No, it's an 80s film.
Okay.
Some sleazy 80s thing.
Well, the last thing I want to really talk about, like just say before you can, you do whatever you do, is like the great characters in this fucking movie. Kevin Bacon is so fucking pathetic, right? In this movie. And like my favorite scene is when he dies, right? Because he is just like, when that scene starts and he's like, "Oh, Maxxxine, don't kill me." You really think any other movie, they stop it, get information out of him and all that kind of shit? Nope. They never have an intention on stopping that shit. And the moment he realizes it, he does the most pathetic Lord's Prayer I've ever fucking heard. And it's so sad when he dies because it's pathetic. Chinatown reference, by the way, in that character. Yeah. And he gets his nose fucked up. And when she fucks him up like that, dude, I love that. Maxxxine has learned, right? And this movie is a great bookend because if you think about, and Steph, you're kind of right. Like the way to think about these 3 movies thematically is the 3 of them put together. Pearl, Maxxxine, and X meets in the middle. Think about that. What does the X look like? Oh, a middle. Holy shit. It's like Pearl, X, Maxxxine. That's fucking brilliant. Was it intentional? I don't fucking know, but it works so well because Pearl has an audition at the end of her film and she fails it. Maxxxine has an audition at the beginning of this film and aces it, and it sets up the whole thing. And that's the juxtaposition in the middle. That's the crisis, the conflict in X is that Pearl didn't get to do what she wanted to do. Maxxxine is on her way to doing what she wants to do. And the events of X spurn Maxxxine into actually elevating herself, there's that word, above what Pearl would do. Because otherwise Maxxine's going to be another Pearl. Right?
She needed, just like at the end of this one where Maxxxine says to her dad, "You gave me exactly what I needed." Like Pearl gave her, the events of X gave her exactly what she needed to kind of conquer Hollywood.
And the other thing is Giancarlo Esposito is fucking amazing in this movie, dude. He's so fucking badass. And I think a lot of people don't like Maxxxine as much as Pearl and X because Pearl and X both, for the most part, stand on their own. Maxxxine needs you to see those 2 films to understand the point of the point, if that makes sense.
That's what's kind of interesting. I would be curious, like someone that had only seen X, because you're right. It is like Maxxxine is informed by Pearl, but it's not as necessary. You could just
so Hollywood 80s cheesy, dude. You got the cops acting like you're the dude's even talking about how he's acting like that.
Yeah. Well, I love it. Even her dad is like being super performative.
When I first watched Maxxxine, that was the one thing that disappointed me was that third act.
Yeah.
But I was really curious. This is the second time I've seen it, right? Because now it's on Max. I haven't gotten it on Blu-ray yet, and I want to. But like, I was really on board because I had thought about it. I was like, well, think about 80s fucking movies, Robbie. Right. And like, this is what happens. There's the big reveal and the guy goes fucking ham and gets taken out and all that kind of shit. Right.
I'm completely there with you. But before I forget, let me fucking say this thing again. Let's point this out. The cover of X. You see the X? Brilliant. Right. The cover of Pearl. Oh my God, we're on our way to a triple X. Brilliant. These fucking cocksuckers didn't do it on Maxxxine. What was that? What?
Oh, they did
This
though.
is-
The actual movie poster of Maxxxine is the lights like behind her, like in a beam.
And yet my Blu-rays leave me with blue balls. Like
That's
that
some
was
bullshit,
such a
dude.
terrible decision. But anyway, let me say my thoughts real quick on the movie. I love everything. I still don't like the third act. That's where I'm at on it. I love everything leading up to that. I think it's fucking super cool. The kill scene where Maxine's friend gets killed with his own knife. That would be the only other kill scene in the whole thing that would be comparable to it. Like that's just so badass. Yeah, in the video store, some of the lighting, it's got the blue and the red Argento lighting. It's super badass. All the split screen. It's very De Palma. Like we said, it's an Italian. It's this very American movie that's inspired by Italian cinema, which is what De Palma films are, right? That's why it feels like a De Palma film. It's tough to go like you can't compare this performance from Mia Goth to the one from Pearl. You just can't. It's just like what the character goes through for me is and the performance, it's just not comparable. Maxxxine doesn't have like enough Maxine's a fucking weird character. She's either really fucking badass, I'm like, you bitches need to go home because I just killed that, or she's like this really awkward person who's uncomfortable.
Well, I think that the contrast with them is because Maxxxine had the strength. It's reading too much into it, but Maxxxine had the strength to run away from her family, leave her family, regardless of the outcome. Whereas Pearl never did
Pearl
that.
didn't.
You know?
Right.
So that
Yeah.
You know.
No, that's a good point.
And a lot of people have an issue with like Maxxxine as soon as she sees the reveal of the killer being her father, how she just kind of gives up the gun and allows herself like they built up this strong character and then like that's the whole point of the fucking movie is Kevin Bacon says the past is coming for you. You know what I'm saying? And like it's all set up. Like when I was watching Maxxxine this time, I was like, it's so obvious. It's so obvious.
Right.
Anybody who really pays attention.
I was trying to look for the other red hair, and that's okay. So that's what they're doing. They're trying to do a mystery slasher. The red herrings weren't there. It doesn't have the fun of a Scream movie in that regard, or just
that's
I wasn't
one thing it lacks about 80s movies that it doesn't get is the fun level, because that's more in the 70s. But then again, let's think about X is set in 79. So it's on the Halloween thing, and a lot of the 80s movies were vibing off of that. So maybe he's talking about like how like it got beyond just fun and more in just ridiculousness. But like all those Yalos we talk about, Verno, think about the third act, man.
No,
right?
totally.
Like, it's all there.
Every fucking Scream movie does that. But for whatever reason, I don't know. There's it does the same thing that Scream does, but when Scream fucking does the third act, I'm like, hell yeah. And when this does it 3 times watching, I just don't care by the end of it. I'm just not that into it. It's cool. I even like where they repeat the line that she says and the editing that they do, the way they edit it in. It's cool, but it's just like it doesn't stick if it doesn't stick that landing, which means it doesn't stick this trilogy's landing perfectly. And we're going to discuss really fucking quickly as soon as we're done. Is this the best trilogy ever? I'll say yes. It probably is the best horror trilogy ever. We'll talk about that real briefly when we're done, but it's still, for me, it doesn't stick that landing. Stu, what did you think, man? Maxxxine, brother, where you at?
This one wasn't for. I feel like they got to a point where it was either going to be a great character breakdown or kind of like, we can default and go back to a love letter of a certain genre of movies, and that's where they decided to go with it. I just feel like the character story that they had in X and Pearl was not nearly as strong as it was here. They decided to bleed a little bit more into the whole, hey, we're making a movie that's a love letter to the genre or this particular era of horror movies. That's what it felt like to me. And I did not like the ending in the third act, man. And it's still I've watched it twice and it just doesn't, I don't know. It just doesn't resonate with me. It didn't work with me. And I felt like this movie definitely had some cool elements, but for what I was really hoping it would be a punctuation cap on top of 2 great movies. This one I felt was the weakest of the bunch, and that's unfortunate. So
yeah. I would say, the only thing I think the style of movie that they're like aping is super stylized. So it's not like they're like, oh, we can't do the story. Let's go lean into the style. They nailed the style. They didn't fuck that up at all. I just think the story, like specifically, and this is exactly what we said, the Maxxxine portion of it, that like Maxxxine throughout the whole story doesn't have enough agency. What happens in a typical giallo movie, her character gets obsessed with solving the crime. She's out there trying to solve the crime. Maxxxine doesn't give a fuck. She's just avoiding having to do anything until the end of the movie, where she avoids everything. She kills Kevin Bacon and then picks up the letter and just decides to still go there.
That's her arc, though. That's her arc, where she like realizes that it's not just about her; it's about other people.
That's true. I mean, you're totally right, and I realized that on my second watch. I just think there's something about it that I didn't. You're right, but it didn't connect with me. Like it didn't work for me. I wasn't with her on that arc.
It's just kind of dawned on me. It just kind of ties into that. Like, whereas the first two films kind of had likable people for the most part, where it's like, you know, there's Pearl and Howard were pieces of shit. Pearl was a piece of shit, and Pearl. In this, everybody was kind of like a piece of shit.
That's an 80s movie. That's the 80s part.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
Underdeveloped characters.
Yeah. Or even just
because
like
the dude that runs the video store, there could have been way more with him.
This,
you know what I'm saying?
I feel like I might be wrong about the De Palma movies, but I feel all the giallo movies that this is influenced by are 2 hours long. Right, Robbie? I feel like Deep Red, all those movies are 2 hours. I don't know if the De Palma ones are not. This one, it felt like it could have used an extra 10 minutes where we connect to Maxxxine a little bit more. They tried.
Like, I like when you stack these three together in the way that Steph was talking about, though, right? It's the beginning of Pearl and the end of Pearl and the beginning of Maxxxine in one movie and then the end of Maxxxine. Like, I fucking love that. I think it's brilliant, dude.
Yeah.
And like, I get what people are saying about the third act and all that kind of shit, but it really does tie in all the way back to Pearl,
right?
And the danger of morality. This movie is talking about cinema, the evolution of the screen, and morality's part in cinema, if that makes sense, which is crazy. My favorite thing about all three of these films, by the way, X opens up on a 4x3, barn door open.
Yeah, man.
Pearl opens up with a barn door closed. There is no movies. And it widens out into the largest scope because back then they made more scope movies, right? Like, let's use this format. And then in Maxxxine, it's a fucking phone when the fucking doors open at the studio. It makes like a tablet, and then it goes out into a phone, right? Like, it's the evolution of the screen. How do we consume porn? How we consume porn is how we consume movies. Porn is art. That's what this whole fucking thing is about, man.
All right.
I love it. You heard it here first, folks. Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah.
I just feel like the space that the first two were created with, like, it was such a tight window. I feel like that creative energy kind of like helped amp up both of these. And like, you're inevitably going to get a little bit of like a lag. I feel like
totally
when you have
that's
that time
it.
off.
There's a creative energy that those first two are connected by.
Yeah.
That Maxxxine is just like, it's not the same thing.
Maxxxine
I enjoy it.
How much time did Ty West put into X and then Pearl? You know what I'm saying? And like, Maxxxine was like, there's got to be a lot of pressure there. But like, I think I literally just said the characters aren't super developed. That's kind of wrong when you think of Giancarlo Esposito and Kevin Bacon in this film. Those characters are great. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think Maxxxine is fan-fucking-tastic in this movie, man. I think her arc, like, she's owned it and then like gets thrown right back to being a little girl. And what does she do? She owns it by the end. She is the true final girl, man.
If the main villain at any of our arcs for all of us was our dad, it's like, we would probably all be like, okay, I'm sorry, I was just fucking around. Like, go ahead. There is something to be said for that, for sure. 100%. But Steph, I don't think we got to
you. Stu, you're right, by the way. You're right, Stu, just so you know. I respect your opinion.
Oh, thank you, bud. I appreciate you.
I just to be clear, I do not. But go ahead, Steph.
Now this one, they're all great films, but this one, it's something about it. I watched it 3 times now. I was thinking third time was gonna be. I don't dislike it, but I don't know if it's because it's like they try to do it as a mystery, and it's like if you kind of like pick up on the dad from the jump, And there's something about the impact of it, the reveal with him, that I don't know, that I feel like maybe there's a disconnect with me and I'm not getting yet.
It doesn't have a
But
good
it doesn't.
impact the first time you watch it, for sure. It's not like a wow moment. It's not, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of an eye roll moment. Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. Even my other watches, I like, I see the setup, but I don't know. Like, I can get why some people find it a little lackluster. Like, that was the reveal, but I don't think it's terrible. I enjoy this film for the most part overall. I actually think it's, I don't want to say I like the style more, but I would say Pearl takes that, then this, then X, but they're all great. I just really like how gritty this movie is. Pearl's fucking badass. It's really I think the biggest thing for me for overall, it's just a great film. But I think what I'm harping on is like that impact with the reveal with the dad. I don't know. But I guess we want to get her character arc where she's standing over him. She's like, "You gave me deliverance." That kind of ties back to Pearl and all that about her never
Divine intervention.
Yes, divine.
Yeah. There you go.
Love the music they were playing. That was such a great scene.
And those of us that grew up in the 80s, we know what it was like being prayed over because we listened to Kiss fucking songs and you know what I'm saying, and read comic books and wear skeleton shirts and shit. At least that was my experience. So
my experience, not necessarily the 80s, but in the 90s. I remember driving back home from Walmart with my dad and my brother, listening to our new tape that my dad just bought us from Cypress Hill, and him throwing the fucking thing out the window on the way home. So what the fuck is this? Hits
Can I get a hit of your weed?
It's like, what the fuck?
How times have changed, man.
Yeah.
I apologize.
If they made Maxxine today, she'd be just vaping weed all day. That's what she'd be doing.
Just sitting around fucking.
And I love all the little, like, the fucking fact that she's got her big cocaine pile in a fucking goose cookie jar, like stupid shit like that. Like, I love it, dude.
So
I think, and that the dude at the video store is watching Alligator, right? Because that's how you get the gator in this movie, shit like that. I love it, dude.
There's probably so many things that I've never like picked up.
Oh, and in Pearl, like, she's literally playing out the farmer's daughter porn, right? Like 40, 50 years or whatever, like before it actually, it's so she's like wearing the same thing, just like with like more modest, right? But like there's so many things that, like, so many visual cues that tie these three films together that I love, man. I'm sorry, I'm rambling now. I'm sorry. No, I don't mean to keep stepping on people. I'm so sorry.
You're good,
These are my 3 favorite horror films of the last fucking 10 years.
Yeah, give me brownie points, to be honest. The fact, because I didn't pick up on the whole him watching Alligator was the shout out to the alligator from Pearl and X. So that's
right.
That's actually really
or
cool.
Even like the star that she steps on is Theda Barrow's star.
Yep.
Who was the star of Cleopatra, who's Pearl's like
on
hero.
in Pearl, like you see the movie poster there and all that shit.
And that's the name of the alligator. She names the alligator Theda.
Yep.
Theda, is it
so
Theda?
Good. Theda,
yeah. He does, like, I love the little tricks he does like that. Like, everybody's death is foreshadowed in X. Like one way or the other. Yep. It's spoken into
and existence. Even in Maxxine, when the dude keeps stabbing himself with the knife in the cast. Why does he got the cast? Why? That's why, to have that scene, man. Like,
that's funny.
I even love that.
He has some like implied past too, where this guy walks into the video store. He's like, "Whoa, hey, this is just a video store. I don't do this anymore." And you think it's the killer.
That's part of the theme, man. Is where it goes from like pervertity. Is that a word? I don't know. I'm making it up now. Perverseness, right? But like perversion, like, it exists in people. When people have the control of cinema, that's where we go. The moral right rises up. But then we see, even in Pearl, the moral right rising up even at the inception of the screen. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And like, this movie, above all else, is about, like, all 3 of these films are about cinema. And I think that's brilliant, dude.
Yeah.
There's so much Psycho references in all 3 of these fucking films. This is a horror movie made by a horror fan of horror movies for horror movie fans.
That was like the biggest thing. Like when I saw it at the theater, this was when I had just bought all these Hitchcock box sets, and I'm watching Hitchcock movies all day, every day. And like the second I saw like the floor of the Psycho Motel, I'm like, oh my god, oh fuck. I mean, yeah, like the way that they used that in this movie was great. And before I forget it, I remember not liking Kevin Bacon, or not liking him, but not liking him as much as I do now. I'm like, what is with this accent? It's so over the top. He's so overacting.
And now it's one of the best performances in the film, right?
Yeah, I really enjoy it, man. It's really
So
good.
Man,
just that
Kevin
whole
Bacon's
like
awesome,
lunch
bro.
scene or whatever, where he like knows, you know, he's got the video, they've centered the video and all that shit. Like his snide ass, smirky ass shit, and that gets totally fucking disheveled. The next scene where she just fucking keys this motherfucker. You gotta pay for this. What a great character. And even the moment where he's looking for her in the bathroom and he's like, I know I'm the best at what I do because I'm a criminal. I'm just not afraid to admit. Like there's so much about that. That means something about cinema too. Because we're talking about how cinema has now been taken back away from the people. And now through sensationalism, we're bringing it back to the big companies that are just giving us bullshit. And I'm not saying that Maxxxine is not as good of a movie intentionally, but I also think that subconsciously it was intentionally. Does that make sense?
No, but all right, let's
that makes it more brilliant to me, man. But whatever.
I will kick it off for the rating on this one. I went back and forth, but I'm just gonna stick with my gut. Like we're comparing this to two movies that we've all said are some of our favorite in the past 10 years. And for me, Maxxxine is still like a little bit of a letdown, but it's fucking awesome. Like I really enjoy the movie. It's incredibly watchable. It's beautiful. The style is great. The kills are super badass. The music, like it's still a really strong movie. But compared to the other ones, I will give it a 3.75 because, and we've said it, impact. I don't get that impact that I want from the fucking killer reveal and like his painted gold face. Why do I gotta look at your fucking face and try to figure out if you have makeup? What the fuck why do you look so weird? Like he looks so weird. Quit it. Yeah, something about that. 3.75 for me. Rocket Robbie, tell me why I'm wrong.
It's better than the Prowler, and I love the fucking Prowler. So this is what I'm going to say. I started this shit off by giving X a 5.69. Then I gave Pearl a 5.369. So I'll give Maxxxine a modest score of a 5. You digs. 5, whatever the fuck you call it here, but it's a 5. I fucking love this movie. It's one of my favorite movies of the year. Are there issues with it? Yeah. Are there issues with every other of my favorite movies this year, including Dune and Furiosa? Yes. Am I more forgiving of this because it's a tribute to 80s horror? Absolutely. Movies are subjective. To me, this movie is brilliant, and the way that this ties all of the themes set up in X and Pearl, and it ties it all together. And I think the way to watch this movie your first time through is release order, but you need to watch it in chronological story order because the themes really work and the symmetry works. This is a trilogy about symmetry, and you don't usually get that in trilogies. Most movies shit the bed by the third movie. You know, we're not talking about Dream Warriors because that's one of the greatest part 3s of all time. But Scream 3 fucking sucks. You know what I'm saying? Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 is not that great. Friday 13th Part 3, it's not as good as 1 and 2 in my opinion, or as good as 4, or 5, which I think is superior to almost all those except for 2. But
the follow-up to Devil's Rejects sucks ass.
3 Gates from Hell or whatever the fuck sucks so bad. And it makes Psycho 3 look like a goddamn masterpiece. So that being said, I'll give it a perfect score of a 5.
Hell yeah, man. I love to hear it, man. And like this, like you giving it a 5 is the thing that's going to make me excited to want to rewatch it again. Like,
yeah,
really,
it's horror fest. I got a 0.569 leeway, so I'm good. I'm good with it.
All right, Big Stu, what are you giving it, man?
I think it's going to be a 3.5 for me, man. It didn't land. I think it did a lot of things well. Had a lot of fun elements, but ultimately the symbiosis and like the way the first two movies kind of like fed on each other, I was really hoping for more of a bombastic conclusion to the story, and just didn't get it. And I also thought they made the fatal flaw of like not putting Mia front and center and really letting her cap it off and be the corner. I thought it kind of like faded into everybody else a little bit too much. So I thought, she should have been like front and center and two. I just didn't like the way it
You know
came
that fucking look and it's when she's Maxxine. The look that she's given Pearl when Pearl's off in the distance, she's kind of like sheepish and like, you know what I'm talking about? When she's
Yes.
There's too much of that in this movie. She should have like grown out of that Maxxine and been more of that
You don't think
badass
she
that steps
did?
on people's nuts. There's too like when I don't know. She's like I don't
She
know.
only comes up
She's
against
back and
that.
forth with it. Like
She only
yeah,
comes
at
up
first
against
she
that
is, but then she's
on-
not.
She only comes up against that with her father, and another great performance we didn't talk about was the director of the film.
yeah, Halsey, fucking
Yeah.
phenomenal. That's pop star.
No way. That's
Sensation
Halsey?
Halsey.
Yeah.
That's
I
Halsey.
thought Halsey was.
Oh, am I wrong? I don't think
She's-
so.
I thought
Halsey-
Halsey was one of the girls that got killed at the beginning.
Oh, I could be totally.
I could be
I'm
wrong.
sorry. I don't think.
I don't know
so,
who the
man.
fuck Halsey is, to be honest. with
Neither
you,
do
so.
I, bro. I
No,
thought I looked it up once upon a time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Halsey
it's-
is one of her friends who gets killed by going up to the
Like,
hill.
Oh fuck! I suck at this.
The one with the short hair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tabby Martin.
Yeah, she's great, and I love
You're
her. Like,
right.
I'm trying to make it too. I'm trying to make art out of bullshit. That's a statement on 80s horror, dude. Right?
I'm-
I mean,
I've
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
man. This
We're
movie's
making
better
a-
than y'all think. Dude.
We're
I'm
making
just
a
saying.
B movie. No, I think it's exactly.
We're
what we
making an
think.
A movie with.
Here's
we're-
the biggest
yeah.
thing. They're doing all these things. They're making an 80s movie. They're making a follow up to X. They're making a follow up to Pearl. But they're making a murder mystery movie that didn't fucking stick that at all. Like that's what it is. That's what we're all complaining about. The people
Well,
that
that's
don't
why I
like this
docked it
movie.
0.69, man.
there you go. There you go. That's the biggest thing. That's what everyone complains about is that third act. It's a murder mystery with a shitty reveal, and that's a big deal. It's a big deal. But where are we at? We got a 3.5 from Stu. Link, where you at, brother?
Like I said, I only really have some small gripes with the film. It's like the impact with the reveal, but that everything else was pretty on point. The mystery was lacking a little bit, but when I look at like the overall trajectory, like from Pearl to X to Maxxine, got to give because there wouldn't be that where Pearl and her mother didn't do shit. We see Maxxine take that step that they never could. Without Maxxine, that really wouldn't hit home. Like still great duo films together, but Maxxine, I feel like Maxxine might be like for me right now is like when you first said Bruno said you saw Pearl, you were kind of expecting to be something different. And maybe I'm doing that with Maxxine right now. So
Right.
but I do think that her arc is achieved, and I do
That's
like that.
true.
That thematic.
She ends this movie as the star. She's
made
still
it,
starting
man.
her cocaine that
Yeah.
Maxxine likes in X, and she is a movie star.
And look at the symmetry. Pearl ends with an audition. Maxxine begins with an audition,
Yeah,
and
I
X
love
is in
that.
between. Like it's so fucking good, dude. It's so perfect, man. They're almost like reverse movies of each other.
Just imagine had they stuck that mystery.
It's like Tenet,
Yeah,
right? It like starts and then it reverses itself in the middle, man. It's so fucking brilliant, dude. Trust me.
I'll give it a 4 though. I
love it.
It's strong. It's just like I do think the mystery could have hit better. I agree.
I
with you
feel
guys
like
on
I
that.
helped up Steph's
No, totally.
rating 0.5. I feel like I did. So like it just makes me feel good.
I was really tempted. I came in here to 3.75, but I'm tempted to give it a 4 because of how easily I know I could throw it on again. Like it's,
Right,
you know what
yeah.
I mean? I would be excited to throw it on after this stream because it's a cool ass movie.